This is a VHS cassette, a video format that I imagine a lot of people out there probably don't recognise. But this was the premiere of home video in the 80s and 90s. Not like now where you can just go on some subscription service and stream anything you want. No, if you wanted to watch something at home, you had to physically own the copy of that movie, so you could watch it again and again and again. So, why is Top Gun so iconic in the world of home video compared to any other movie that's come out? Well, I promise you this is an interesting story, so just bear with me. Hello! Welcome to Brainspill, the laziest show on the internet. My name is Tank, and I feel the need for speed. Top Gun is a high-flying action movie directed by Tony Scott and released in the year 1986, and follows the story of United States Navy Lieutenant Maverick in his climb through the Navy's elite fighter weapons school, Top Gun. Acclaimed for its visual effects, the movie went on to gross $357 million globally against a budget of about $15 million, becoming the highest-grossing domestic movie that year. And that itself is incredible, but what I find even more incredible about this is the sheer fact that this movie has one of the single best soundtracks of any movie. I mean, if you're making any soundtrack and you have Kenny Loggins on it, you're doing something right. Danger Zone! So, the movie was released in 1986, but the advent of home cinema was still growing, where people wanted to own and keep their videos so they could rewatch them at home whenever they wanted to. So, why is this movie so famed for its place in the history of home cinema? Well, the VHS was actually created in the 1950s, but it would take some time before this became an affordable and widely marketed home video format to use, beating out competition from others such as home beta. VHS eventually took the crown, and the real work began with companies like Philips and Sony who would start creating their own home cinema systems to be able to watch these movies. VHS tapes were just generally better. The tapes and reels inside of them could have more footage. They were also known to be a lot more affordable, and many big companies started to adopt it. So eventually the VHS just won out and became the default format for anybody that wanted to own a movie at home. This was absolutely game-changing at the time. I mean, for anybody that wanted to see a film away from the cinema, the only real chance you'd have to see it is either if you went to another rerun on a different showing, or maybe if you caught it on some TV channel that picked it up a few years later. Aside from that, you'd be pretty hard-pressed for options. But with the advent of home cinema, this created an entire industry in itself. Not only for the people that made the VHS tapes, but also for many companies as well to capitalise on this new and emerging market. Enter Blockbuster, of all people. But now there was much more accessible and rewatchable ways to get your favourite movies back on your TV screen, and a second opportunity for movie makers to profit off their creation from these cinematic masterpieces. While this all sounds pretty great, the original VHS was marketed to the public at a cost which was about $5,500 a pop, which was insane. I mean, I like movies as much as the next guy, but $5,500? That's a bit steep. Particularly when it would cost that much for me to make my own movie, and then I could maybe sell that for probably about the same price. So yeah, there wasn't really many people buying VHSs at the time, as you might imagine. Makes you glad that we have this nice little thing called YouTube to avoid you having to remortgage your home just to be able to afford a VHS of your favourite movie. I mean, you could probably find the same thing now for about 50 cents, but there we are. This wouldn't last long, however, as the price would soon drop, and into the late 70s and early 80s, these VHSs would become a bit more affordable, but in the grand scheme of things, they'd be still pretty pricey. A VHS would be selling for what the equivalent sum now is $180. Again, this is crazy, and you'd think that anybody with a liquor sense would make these a little bit more affordable in order to get everybody on board. But that wasn't really the purpose here. The purpose was for studios to try and recoup some of the money that they may have lost on when making these movies in the first place. So if for whatever reason these movies came out and they were complete flops in cinema, they could then jack the prices up and sell them afterwards for an insane amount. So that is the big reason why a lot of these movies were just so out of reach for so many people. Pretty slimy, but business is business, I guess. The advent of home video created an entirely new industry, such as Blockbuster, who basically created a market of, instead of selling these to people, given the ridiculous prices on some of these VHSs, to renting them instead. So people would walk into a Blockbuster, rent whatever movie they wanted to see, watch it once or twice, and then hand it back for a fraction of the price that it would cost to actually buy one of these movies. This sounds pretty insane to think about now, but that was the way things were. I mean, how many times do you need to watch Free Willy on VHS? Well, the answer is one, and you don't want to be spending almost $100 on it, so yeah, rent it, watch it once, and then send it back. Because I ain't paying $100 for a VHS, even if it's Free Willy. So, many movies were being sold with these incredibly high price tags, and then comes along Top Gun on VHS, that sold at the huge price of $26.95. So, why is this so cheap compared to everything that came before it? This was by far the lowest priced feature film sold on the VHS market to date, but there was a sneaky trick implemented to be able to try and justify the lowered price. Most VHS movies were basically just the movie, but what they did instead on this movie was, in all copies sold in the VHS format, there would be an advert for Pepsi just before the movie was shown. And no, this has absolutely no correlation to the Pepsi Jet video I made some time ago on my channel, it's just a very strange coincidence. By having this advert at the start of the movie, they could take a hit on lowering the price and getting this into as many homes as possible. For many, this was the first time they were able to get their hands on a VHS at a really reasonable price. And I'm pretty sure that I can speak for most people out there and say that I would rather sit through a commercial for Pepsi than pay however many hundreds of dollars just to watch this movie. I would be willing to take that hit, not gonna lie. Paramount were marketing this thing very hard through an $8 million campaign, and the deal with Pepsi would alleviate some of the costs that hit studios when they would normally make their movies onto home video formats. The amazing thing about this bold approach is that it paid off, with sales for home video skyrocketing, and from that point onwards, this was pretty much the norm for many movies released in this way. The advanced demand was so high that the pre-sales made it the highest selling videocassette in the history of the whole industry. This was before it was even available in stores, mind you. This was so successful, in fact, that Pepsi wanted it again, and this time they had a collaboration with Spielberg on the movie E.T., and they did the same thing, but instead were able to market it at $19.99, even cheaper than Top Gun. Coca-Cola would soon get on board with a similar concept with many other blockbuster movies, which eventually led to the price of the VHS becoming reasonable across the board, taking advantage of these lucrative advertising deals and making the whole marketing much more competitive in the process. So, if you made a movie and released it at the same time as Indiana Jones, chances are your movie would cost about 4 times as much because you didn't have all this advertising that you could place at the start of your movie. Indiana Jones had Coca-Cola, meaning that they could ram the prices down really, really low. So, in order to stay competitive, many people had to follow the trend and just reduce the prices across the board, even to get a look in to try and sell your VHS on the market. That was just the way things were going at this point. And it was this one change that revolutionised the entire industry, and we have Top Gun to thank for that. Also Cracked.com, because they were the ones that originally investigated this, so just thought I'd mention that as well. If you guys liked that video, here's another one just like it. I'll see you guys in the next video. Fantastic.